Good afternoon, everyone. Great to be here. It's a pleasure, Chicago, this wonderful event. I'm curious, raise your hand if you love that espresso cart at the end. Best idea at any conference I've been to. The quality of the coffee just makes such a difference. Did you guys notice what it said in the front? Innovate and caffeinate. That's my new motto. I'm going to put that. Now, somebody got very creative there. I love it. I think before you can have innovation, you got to have creativity, right? So that's going to be my motto. You guys can hold me to that. I'm going to put it on my profile. Create, innovate, and caffeinate. All right, so I only have 25 to 30 minutes with you and lots of content to go through. So I'll start with a quick background on me. Maybe I don't have the quick background on me slide. That's all right, we'll do it from here. Born and raised in Chile, moved to California when I was in college, and then I decided to pursue my childhood dream of becoming a claims manager in insurance, P&C insurance. So I stayed about 8 years with Progressive out of Cleveland, different claims management roles. Then I moved to the software side, went to work for Mitchell, which at the time was Mitchell International. That's how I ended up in San Diego, California, where I live today. About 8 years with Mitchell as well, and then Guidewire. So 13 years at Guidewire. And in my role, I get to talk to a lot of insurance organizations about what they're doing on the digital side, as well as workflow, automation. The fun part of my job is spending it with claims organizations across the globe, lots of travel. The not so fun part, I do get to validate our roadmap and provide a lot of the feedback I get to our product management and product development organizations, which is super important for us. So validating the roadmap is a lot of what I do. Today, I'm here to cover the moments that matter the most. So whether you have a billing question, your premiums went up. Don't remind me, in California, my homeowner premiums quadrupled in the last 2 years. Or you have a claim, right? That's the moment when you get to feel the product that you purchased from your insurer, right? Or as my lawyer friends would say, the policy contract of adhesion. And for organizations, for companies, that's where you can differentiate, where you can show your brand, right? The service that you promised. So technology has made it easier. Today I have a user-friendly app. I can look up my premiums, why they went up. I still want to talk to an agent once in a while, but it's made it easier, faster, right? But that has also raised the bar. So companies need to make sure that the experience they're delivering for me are up to par, right? I want it in the channel that I prefer, and I may start a claim on a digital channel through some friendly website, but I want updates via text. Now, I travel with a colleague of mine that talks about uploading images has become so easy, right? But if his daughter gets in an accident, no problem. But if his mother gets in an accident, that claim file is going to be open for 10 years before any images get uploaded. So depending on your preferences, right, that will vary. Also, we want it at the time it's convenient for us. I'll tell you a quick anecdote. On the way to Chicago from San Diego a couple nights ago, we got rerouted to St. Louis. There was weather at O'Hare, closed it for about 3 hours. The pilot did a good job telling us, okay, we're going to land in St. Louis. There's weather in Chicago. When it reopens, we'll take off. Beautiful place, St. Louis. I only got to see it through the airplane window. We sat there for 3 hours on the tarmac. And about an hour in, an hour, 15 minutes, nothing. So everybody started getting that anxiety, right? We know the weather, people are checking their phones. It's up to, whenever it clears, but it's nice to have that cadence of communication. And it would have been much better to anticipate the anxiety, right? That's when the anxiety starts to build. Now for claims and for the full policy life cycle, not just claims, those gaps in communication may have always existed, but technology and these higher expectations we have today have put a magnifying glass on these gaps. So there's definitely opportunities, right? A claim comes in, there are so many moving pieces, so many reasons why that communication could break down or the cadence of the updates, whether it's vendors involved, the different roles within the claims organization where it may have been segmented, or collaboration within that claim file. If it's something that maybe a specialist needs to take a look at, or it goes to SIU for some fraud warning, what have you, right? Tons of reasons. The reactive responses is probably the biggest area of opportunity where if we can leverage technology to be proactive about reaching out, right? Not letting that anxiety build with the policyholder or the claimant, that's where it starts to make a big difference. Now, AI, huge promise, right? The generative AI, we're already seeing it all over the place. It could summarize things. We see it on claim files, and many customers already using that, where it frees up the hands of those that are handling a heavy workload from claims, and now they can focus on higher value activities. But on the other side, most of the customers we talk to, when it comes to agentic AI, which has the even bigger promise, they're still in POC status. Most of them haven't gone to production and don't trust it entirely, right? Because the guardrails are just not there yet. I was talking to somebody earlier before lunch, when we started building faster cars, and by faster cars, a Model T, what did it go, 30 miles an hour or something like that? We didn't have seat belts, airbags, right? The rigid construction, the frame, all the energy from an impact went to the driver, the passengers. So very similar, right? AI is here to give us speed, more effective communication that we can set up, we can be proactive, but we need the guardrail. So somewhere in the middle, but it's promising to augment the human capabilities. And that's key, right? The individuals that are going to deliver that empathy, the expectations that the policyholders or the claimants have during those experiences, during the claim, during a policy change, and what have you, whether it's an underwriter assessing a risk, needing to get back to a broker so that you don't lose the business to the next broker that was quicker at responding, or a claim. Those are the areas where we can make significant strides. There is one that I will touch on a little bit later here, is talking about leveraging AI to connect ecosystem partners and different vendors. There's a good opportunity there that I want to kind of hold that thought, but definitely opportunities on the side of setting up proactive communication to improve that overall experience. Now, the regulatory, of course, is a concern, right? I think some of the announcements we're seeing lately, or recent announcements about piloting tools that can help companies be more transparent as to how they programmed or trained their agents, their AI agents, in terms of, is it going to be fair, right? The same expectations we have from humans to develop, to deliver that claim experience, any liability determination or anything where a human needs to be involved, coverage determination, for example, it needs to be transparent for the regulatory. So same expectations for the AI agents. Now, what are the primary touch points where I, as a claims organization, get to shine with my brand, with the promise that I made during that policy contract, deliver the right message with that empathy? This brings me to a conversation we're having with almost every organization out there, and that's the silver tsunami, right? The talent gap. Anybody here read the Talent Tectonics? Dr. Steve Hunt wrote this book about the major tectonic shifts in the workforce in the world, and the top two are digitalization and the workforce, the demographics. Right? So he puts this map of the top 10 economies in the world. 9 out of those 10 have more people exiting the workforce than they have younger generations entering it. I think the only one that escapes is India. So you have Germany, Japan, China, US, all of these nations with the same challenge. So not just in the insurance industry, but in claims. That means the people that have the experience to deliver that empathy, to have that better communication with the customer, are leaving that gap, right? It's going to take some time for the new talent to get up to speed with that, and that's the talent gap. So in order to differentiate and deliver empathy, as much as technology is helping us, I think there's opportunity there to also reimagine the industry and attract the young talent to some of these roles. Because technology is going to help reshape a lot of the claims roles, probably on the underwriting side as well. Now, I want to take us back in time a little bit. And this is compressed. Right? You'll see the years kind of crunch all the way to 2050. But look at the timeline here from the technological advancements from when the automobile, for example, was first produced, and man in the moon. Somewhere in there between the automobile, man in the moon, or maybe a little later, was when Volvo in Sweden shared the safety belt with the rest of the world. So think about how much time that took from when the automobile came out until there was safety. Not to mention the airbags, right? Airbags, I think, what the laws were in the 90s. Now, take a look at the World Wide Web and how things took off from there. That's the one thing that's connecting all of us across the world, right? The one advent that Jeff Bezos bet his parents' retirement money on, right? Because it was growing at 2,000%. Now, little fun trivia for you. How many searches do you think per minute? Or better yet, let's start with the WWW, or the World Wide Web. How many new devices are connected to the internet? 152K, approximately, devices per day connecting. Those are new devices worldwide. Little trivia. Some of the surveys may be off a little bit depending on what source you believe, but that's a pretty interesting number. Now, the Google searches. Think Google estimates, any guesses how many searches we do? So depending on, again, what source, what survey you believe, between maybe 100K. I didn't want to look up the one for per day because it went into the billions. So this is per minute. Last one, how many times do you think we look at our phones per day? So 158 was kind of the conservative one, up to 340. So I think it said something like 89% of us look at our phone within the first 10 minutes when we wake up. Of course, got to look at the time, right? And the alarm's probably on your phone now. So, but anyways, putting this into perspective, the technology and the advancements, how far we've come. Now, I want to take you even further back. Now I'm going to date myself here. I was lucky within one of the claims organizations that we piloted going to electronic estimating. So our field adjusters were still writing by hand the vehicle damage estimates. They carried around these heavy Mitchell books everywhere. And they had to calculate clear coat and labor overlap. Right? And our company forced them to staple the math, the receipt, to that written estimate to show the calculations. Now, our pilot was to go to, at the time it was called ADP, Penpro. I think that became Solera Autotex eventually. And we thought, if you could crunch this, by the way, as a field adjuster filling out a pretty large estimate on a heavy hit, if you got the parts out of order at some point, or you missed something and you wanted to insert it, we didn't accept any erase or any scratches. You had to rewrite it. You had to start from all over again. So very time-consuming. And it, by the way, had carbon copies underneath, so you could leave one with a body shop, have the rest for the company. But our biggest bet was that the electronic estimating on the laptops was going to save so much time that our field adjusters were going to double the number of vehicles they could see in a day. Now, we tested this in Los Angeles, and guess what the traffic said? Los Angeles, California. Nope. It ended up being about the same, maybe one more inspection per day. What it really changed was the accuracy of the estimates. So our expectation was around volume, and maybe we could do a lot more with the same field reps. Turned out to be accuracy. So just a little history for you. Any of you still using some of the, or see some of the body shops using those estimates? By the way, on the lighter hits, the lighter damage, we got feedback from adjusters that said, I prefer to write it by hand because it's faster. Very surprising. All right, so back to our industry. I think the technology and the advancements are an opportunity for us to reimagine the industry. Again, going back to the talent gaps and our opportunity to reinvent the industry and attract young talent. I remember that black and green screen. I thought it was modern at the time. Now we have cloud and now the AI. Now, what are some of the specific areas? Let's talk about the opportunities for communication, first notice of loss, or first report of an injury, right? You want to have that clear message, clear expectations, and if you can trigger automated communications to reassure the claimant or anybody reporting that claim or that injury that we received your claim, those are things that free up adjusters' times in different claims roles, and you still have that proactive communication with the customer. On the investigation and evaluation side, I think this is probably the one area where claims adjusting has the most interesting aspect that could attract young talent. And if we leverage technology to free up their hands so that they can spend the right time assessing liability, assessing coverage, and maybe negotiations, a well-prepared liability assessment gives you much higher chances of success. So I remember investigating for potential fraud, having maybe intercompany arbitration where you would argue liability against, within the states where you have comp neg. Those are really the interesting aspects of claims adjusting, not collecting the notes and summarizing things and looking and hunting and pecking for information, right? So those are the areas where technology is helping augment these roles, and I think have an opportunity to really shift and change the way that adjusters and others collaborate in a claim file. Very similar aspect on the underwriting side, right? If I have, as an underwriter, the time to look at more of the portfolio view of all of the different risks, that's really my job, right? Not just assessing risk by risk and spending maybe half a day on whether I'm going to approve or not, and before I can get back to the broker. One more I'll touch on this one and give you an example, all the way to the closure of the claim and every last penny that you recover. We did a study that we thought that if we paid the claim immediately, we called them 0 to 9s. Anybody reporting a claim, we were there within the first 9 hours, and we cut a check if we could. As results came back and we started doing more and more surveys of customer satisfaction, it was more important for the customer to have clear expectations and the company meet the expectations versus having that payment in their hands the first day or the first couple days. So if we set expectations that you would get a check on day 30, it was more important that we met or exceeded that versus having a check day 1. So we learned from that, and I think that's another opportunity where automation and setting up the proactive approach in claims could make a big difference. All right, what are some of the areas that I think are kind of low-hanging fruit. The first one, lots of conversation around triggers that can help move that claim along and be proactive on communication. The workflow, automation, the tools are there today to refine where the system can actually take the claim from left to right without waiting for an adjuster to get through the diaries or the different activities. Now, the cadence, if you go back to my St. Louis sitting on the airplane story, that's critical, right? Avoid the gap, avoid that anxiety, and the channels. A ton of conversations around setting up workflow automation so that you can ping the customer on digital channel, for example, if a vendor's done with a service, with a repair on the vehicle, for example, or if somebody needs to give us additional information on an injury, reach out automatically without having to wait for an adjuster. Now, the three main ones, again, the top one that comes up that we have most conversations around, refining workflow and automation. The tools are there today. What's making a difference is now we have an opportunity to make, instead of just task automation, more of an autonomous workflow that can be driven by AI agents. That's one of the biggest areas of discussion. There's that second one, utilizing technology vendors and partners I said I would come back to. That's critical, right? That's what I call bridgers. Because today, what's the use of setting up a better workflow that's automated if I don't have the data from the partners, right? To automate a payment, for example. I get an estimate, I get an invoice, or if I have information sitting there from a fraud score, from a Shift or a Frisk or a Verisk type report, LexisNexis. All that data that I may need in order to automate the flow, I'm dependent on it. So if I don't have those integration points, and that's project time, right? That takes effort, that's money for these companies to set up in time. Technology can help us lower the cost of those integrations and speed them up and make changes as we refine those workflows. So definitely welcome in that flow. A lot of the reasons that we're getting as far as feedback for why companies haven't reached higher levels of automation is because of that middle one, where we're dependent on so much data. Let's not mention the autonomous vehicles coming up, where even more data is going to be transmitted. All right, I think about 7 minutes left. So what are we seeing in the market? This is the big message I was telling you about on the automation of workflows. We are at the task automation phase right now, with some companies starting to move in the middle where the autonomous workflow can start to gain some trust and see it in production, see it in real life. A lot of the AI models, the agentic models, don't have the trust from most of these organizations. They're still in POC status. But that's the promise, right? If I can have within my claims core system kind of a virtual adjuster in there that's moving the needle, no matter what. If invoice comes in from a vendor, it can trigger an automation flow to approve it. If something else moves on the claim to a maturity point, it can trigger an automation flow without having to wait for an adjuster. That's what this talks about. All right. So some of the final points here as we get into my last 5 minutes. On the improved claimant satisfaction, better NPS scores and retention, a lot more expensive to go out and get a new customer than it is to keep one. Right? We had plenty of surveys back in my days, and the claim point, the claims experience is critical there. I recall having third-party claimants that weren't insured with us asking me for my card because that claim experience had been good. They wanted to buy a policy from us. The opposite is also true, right? Customers drop that insurer if that claim experience is poor. The middle one, reducing cycle times to improve workflows and productivity. Big money on that one. The critical aspects of that automation and the time spent on manual tasks. Today, we have generative AI alleviating a lot of that, but the big difference, the big delta is going to be in the agentic flows that can actually take the next step without having to wait for an adjuster. I think that's going to make a big difference in those roles. We were doing a user experience study with some of my colleagues, and somebody I travel with a lot that has been in the industry for longer than I have, and we were looking at, okay, how would adjusters like to see dashboards and reports? And Michael, my colleague, said, Joseph, adjusters don't look at dashboards and reports. I said, well, why not? Maybe not today, but the adjuster of the future should, right? More like an analyst or a business owner. All right. The bottom one, ensure compliance. I think that's one of the biggest things holding organizations back, because you want to have the transparency with the AI agents as to how you train them. And that's not easy to achieve, right? So the key message here is having a platform that can support and have the flexibility to plug in your own agents that you can build, or some that you get from partner ecosystems, or your provider, your SaaS provider. All right, as we count down to the last 3 minutes, I want to leave you with one last key message, and let's see if this works. I think the technical team in the back did a good job at adding these for me. I want you guys to read these with me as loud as you can. Create, innovate, and caffeinate. Thank you guys. You've been a wonderful audience.